Bezeshkian. I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. At 69, he's the oldest man ever to be elected president of Iran, which is kind of ridiculous because at 69, that's like a young spring chicken.
Yeah, that's
in
20
American
years
politics.
younger than an American
Yeah.
politician. That's crazy.
We're already people in their 80s.
Hey all, welcome back. Episode 38. As you can see,
Yeah.
we're different. We're in different rooms again. Still in the same city, just in different rooms. We had some scheduling conflicts and our normal recording time. We were actually lucky enough to be a guest on Left of the Projector, discussing my favorite movie, True Romance. It was a really great discussion. We want to thank Evan for having us on Left of the Projector. That'll be coming out, I believe he said sometime in August for that. So make sure you're subscribed to Left of the Projector podcast and look forward to hearing me and Kanan discuss my favorite movie, True Romance, where I definitely became too much of like a nerd movie bro and was just like, actually, did you know that when Aragorn kicked that helmet, he broke his toe? That guy,
Wrong
but for
movie.
like every scene.
That was me.
Yeah, that
That's
guy,
me.
but for every scene of True Romance. But it was a lot of fun. So we were recording this at not our usual time, and because of that, we weren't able to totally.
Hey, but we will give you
so-
guys what you need. Your weekly dose of revolutionary rhetoric.
Yeah.
All right. We got two different lighting situations, so hopefully that doesn't bother
It's
your
not
eyes too
distracting.
much.
Yeah. And this
Yeah,
is
we
also
got-
going to be more of a short episode, I think. We don't have a ton.
Yeah, 30 to 45 minutes, but we say that a lot.
We always say that, yeah. So I guess we could kick it off with kind of moving it away from America. There's been a lot of political elections taking place around the world, both in the Middle East and in Western Europe, that have kind of been surprising, maybe not shocking, but surprising. Do you want to kick it off with the Labour Party wins in England? Jeremy Corbyn now?
Sure. So while all of Europe is basically running amok towards the right wing, towards fascism, surprisingly, England's like, we've had enough of the Tories, and they kicked them out. So let me give you some ideas of how bad the Conservatives lost. Let me see. Okay, so Labour won 411 seats. So that is up 209 from their previous election in 2019. So they have literally doubled their seats. The Conservatives won, basically, the Tories won 121 seats. They are down 244 from their 2019. So from a total of 365 seats, they're now at 121. They have lost 2/3 of their seats in one sitting. I don't know if that's not like a wipeout. I don't know what is. The Liberal Democrats gained 61 seats for a total of 72. The Scottish National Party won 9 seats, down from 48. So a total of 72. Oh, so they only won, the Scottish National Party only won 9 seats from 48. So they lost a lot of seats as well.
Yeah.
So Labour basically blew them out. And this is from, what was it, 14 years under the Labour, under the Tories, under the Conservative Party. And I mean, England is just falling apart. From what I understand, England is like at this point a third world country. I don't like to use that metric or that term, but basically it's being broken down. Their national healthcare system is being ruined. Their transportation systems are either getting privatized or had no funding at all. Here, let me give you some more idea of like who is now running the Labour Party. So Keir Starmer, I hope I'm saying that right. He's a funky looking fellow, if I may say so myself. He's also a knighted, if you did not know. So Sir Keir Starmer has been the leader of the Labour Party since 2020. And so now he's has won and become, what was it, the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister in the United Kingdom since July of 2024. He's born in London, raised in Surrey. I'm not very sure where Surrey is, but he is from England itself. Bachelor of Law, blah, 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 blah. The things that are not needed to know. This guy, I believe, kicked Jeremy Corbyn out of the party for anti-Semitism. At least for the illusion, or he wanted it to get the anti-Semitic brand, anti-Semitism, the label of anti-Semitism off of the Labour Party, if he believed or he didn't believe that was actually what Jeremy Corbyn was doing, which is fucking bullshit. Jeremy Corbyn's not an anti-Semite. But just, it's fucking politics. You got to clear up images and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen
And
a lot
so,
of like kind of drama about like Corbyn's reintegration and kind of retakeover of labor. I think he had to run as an independent, right? As I understand
I believe
it.
so.
Yeah, just because his ties to the Labor Party are being kicked off the Labor Party.
Exactly. But unfortunately, Starmer is more of a conservative. I wouldn't say conservative. He is more of a moderate,
Right.
than more towards like the socialist left leaning. So throughout his tenure as labor leader, Starmer has tried to make his party more electable. Where have we heard this before? By forcing out individuals seen as entrenched in its socialist left wing, the faction that ran the party under its previous leader, Jeremy Corbyn. So, Jeremy Corbyn is what I would call just Bernie Sanders, the British Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I've seen Bernie Sanders has been tweeting and posting a lot on social media of like congratulating and like hyping up Jeremy Corbyn just in days after this election.
Hell yeah.
Because I had to kind of do a crash course about this. I have never really like been super involved with British politics. I knew that the Tories and kind of the conservative wing of British politics had kind of largely taken over and have held the kind of prime minister position for the last few. I know like they've had
last three elections.
Yeah, last three, but they've been real rapid fire, right? Like after Boris Johnson was out, there was like one person in for like 6 months, and then another person in was like 8 months or something. Like they've had a bitch of a time apparently keeping prime ministers.
Well, yeah, that's because they're all fucking stupid. Like these people are not meant to be in fucking politics. They literally look like they came out of like, I don't know, an alleyway in London. And it's like, I'm about to shank you, bruv, or whatever. I don't know what goes on in London, bro.
I don't know, man.
I know lots of stabbings in London.
Yeah, and to answer or to follow back up, Surrey is just like, I think it's just a town just southwest of London, so it's really close to London.
Got it. So he's like, I don't want to be next to these fucking immigrants in London. I'm gonna move a little southwest. I'm just kidding. It's probably cheaper. So. And basically, like I said before, after Corbyn called the findings of an inquiry into anti-Semitism in the party dramatically overstated, Starmer suspended him. Sometimes you have to be ruthless to be a good leader. So that was why he did that. And he is moving towards centrism. It's been criticized by left-leaning members of his own party. And he has backtracked several key pledges, including that Labour would increase income tax, scrap university tuition fees, nationalize the majority of Britain's public services. So basically, what we're looking at is like, yes, the Labour Party won. They won this dramatic, upset versus the Tories. But what it looks like is the people that won, the Labour Party, is just becoming more centrist in general. So who really won here? It's not really Labour, the old school Labour that we all know and love from back in the day, the semi-socialites.
That's kind of the what to look for moving forward. If we think about this kind of from the leftist or from the Marxist perspective, is like, this is all well and good, but what does this actually mean moving forward? Are we going to start seeing more kind of like, we're about to pivot and talk about France, and we've seen some kind of like real promises come out of this new French leftist coalition, and I wonder if the English counterparts, are they going to be doing something similar, or what's their plan moving forward? Like, do they have what's the tangible benefit to the working class, to the poor in England? So like that's kind of more what I'm curious to keep an eye out for.
I see this figure, Sommer, I see him as more of a Bill Clinton figure. He's trying to triangulate, become more centrist, weed out the socialists in the party. So what we'll see is like possibly a little bit less of racist laws passing. We might see some reduction of privatization, but for long-term effects, I think it would be quite problematic because it's just not radical enough.
Yeah.
And I mean, radical in the sense of Jeremy Corbyn's not even radical.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
At the end of the
He's
day,
a social democrat.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's just more social democrat stuff, like more social democracy programs and stuff. So we'll see how that actually
it's that whole Republican Democrat where the Democrat kind of like stables out the economy a little bit by making like some sort of minor pledges toward labor, and then the Republican takes over, everything fucking free falls, and the Democrat kind of like whoop, and then
stabilizes it out again.
It's never going to go up.
But it just keeps going over. If you look at it over the long term, that trajectory will always kind of flow down.
Exactly. And so what I'm scared of actually is I've had a couple political commentators that I watch point out that there is a new party in England. It's the Reform Party with that fucking douchebag of a character, Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
And basically, these guys are far right.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of people are predicting is with Labor coming back into power, and they have all the power now. They can do whatever they like. They have the literal majority of seats. So if you put everybody else, combine everybody else together versus Labor, Labor still has more seats in the parliament.
Yeah.
Right? So they can pass whatever they need. When they realize that Labor is not going to do much, what's going to be problematic is then, okay, then they're going to switch back toward the right wing, and the only real right wing party that's even like that hasn't destroyed anything or has not give doubt to people would be the Reform Party with Nigel Farage. And so that's what's scary is because those guys are just straight out right wing. Like,
so your concern is like that kind of rubber band effect of where if you pull too far to the left, it snaps back further to the right. And
well, it's not. I wouldn't say back too far to the left. I would say they thought they elected the left,
right?
And then what they got was moderate Democrats. What we have here in America. And there was no change involved. And so to get change, people choose radical options. And the only radical option that has not been tried already would be a far right wing, because there is no far left in England, right? There's you pretty much go as left as you can as Labour Party, but then that's even been stripped down when Corbyn was kicked out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So right now we have center left kind of. I would just call it the center at this point with Labor, and the rest of it is just right wing. There are parties like the Scottish National Party, but that's more of like a national party that has nothing to do with like large amounts of political power, because the people that are going to vote for the Scottish National Party are people from Scotland. That's about it. They're not going to be able to control the entire of the UK.
Yeah.
And so there are really no options. And so I'm scared that it's gonna come back to bite them in the ass by being so moderate and not actually creating laws to change anything. Yeah. But I would say, bringing us to our next topic here, that the French elections are actually a bit better for a long-sighted.
A little more optimistic here with kind of comparing it to the English elections. The French election seemed like it actually could be a little more radical, a little more revolutionary at least in its overall kind of tone. Yeah, so what was very surprising to me is the turn of Macron, because Macron's a centrist, right? Or whatever the fuck he wants that to mean. He's right-wing. He's just not a far right wing. Yeah.
He is your quote unquote milk toast fucking guy, puts on a suit, politician, has no real values or morals, and just puts his finger in the wind and then chooses where to go. I was surprised because usually when it comes to the left wing and the right wing, centrists usually turn toward the right wing. They backstab the left as always. That was surprising was Macron turned around and was like, you know what? Let's work with the fucking leftists. And I was like, what? What is going on? Because this actually saved France in a sense for now.
Yeah, so that's the interesting part is there's such a huge coalition between all these parties. I mean, this is the what was the full list? It's the France Unbowed, which is like a radical group, the Greens, the Socialists, and the Communists all kind of came together to work with this kind of middle block of more of the centrists, which I think that's the Ensemble Alliance. What they're
the centrists are the Ensemble Alliance.
Yeah, and then
I think if you look up into it, the New Popular Front are not even that radical. That's the thing. These people are more environmentalists and very like DSA kind of like socialists.
Yeah, there's a very small. I think like 8 of them or something that won seats are communists. So like, shout out to France for having like actual communists. I don't know. Let me try to find the actual number. But within that coalition, a very, very small group of them are communists, and they call themselves communists. I don't know what their actual I don't know if they would go like Marxist-Leninists. I'm not sure. But that was just, I read that and I just thought that was interesting. It's like, cool.
And
Yeah.
which
So here's an issue though. Moving forward, is they still don't. There's still not a prime minister that's been announced, and so that's kind of what they're working on now, is where this prime minister is going to come from, or excuse me, the president of parliament. So who's going to take like leadership positions within the French National Assembly?
well,
the
President Parliament is still going to be Emmanuel Macron. He's the picking out prime minister. But the problem there is there's no majority. There is no majority
Yeah.
in the parliament, and usually they go off of the majority, is from what I understand. But 32.6 is the
Well,
largest.
so that's what I
pick,
was
which
saying.
is the
They're
new
gonna
Popular Front.
gonna have to like kind of rebuild coalition, and this is the one worry, is that will those centrists stay allied to this leftist? Because centrists, you know, if you're being very cynical and kind of pessimistic, typically throughout history, centrists have always kind of allied themselves with the right and with fascism, and that's kind of like, I wonder like what deals are being made in the coming weeks, because Macron had mentioned in some interview that this new election to choose this new leader is going to take like weeks, if you know, many days, if not weeks, and so a lot of deals are going to be made, a lot of like, you know, negotiations are going to happen, and I'm just hoping that the resolve of the centrist party is going to stay with the left and not kind of bow, because the difference is not that huge. There's only a 40 seat difference between the like actual like fascist group and the actual Popular Front, the new left. So there's only a 40 seat difference there, and then the centrist group makes up another 170 seats. So it would be very easy for just a handful of those centrists to splinter off and actually give that slim majority to the National Rally, the right-wing group. So like they wouldn't have a majority within Parliament or within their National Assembly, but they would have, if enough centrists sided with them, they would have at least the largest voting bloc within the National Assembly.
Yeah.
So we just have to hope that the centrists stay, you know, loyal to the new Popular Front, the leftist groups.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, there was still an uprising of the left.
Yes.
And I think what is important to take away from this is that if we all do unite, and I know, God, us leftists, we infight like crazy. You know, there's notorious, you know, memes and shit of like Marxist Leninists throwing anarchists off bridges, right? And and then the comments below is like, I see nothing wrong with this. I'm sitting there, I'm like, listen, I'm like, yes, these are just jokes. At the end of the day, these are just jokes. We must align for the greater good. You know, there's like, these are now our friends, enemies later, right? But I rather have enemies when we have a socialist government, have to fight with an anarchist how we're going to implement things, versus fighting with the fucking fascistic you know, demagogue.
Yeah, I have two more points to this kind of this French election, and then we can kind of continue or move on. Is the first is, this is great. I mean, because at the end of the day, both in England and in France, it shows that the voters, the actual people that are like the actual people of these countries, by and large, support left-wing ideology more than they support right-wing ideology, and that's just kind of makes me a little hopeful for the future, that like maybe the trend of the masses of the people is trending toward leftism vaguely, you know what I mean, like, or at least they are neglecting right-wing ideology in favor of left-wing ideology. Whether or not that's incredibly like fleshed out, or how, to the extent of which they do that neglecting, is yet to be seen. But by and large, on balance, the people of both France and England are rejecting right-wing ideology for left-wing ideology. That's my first point. So that's good to see. The second point is more frustrating, which is the liberal take on this, which is like to completely misunderstand and misconstrue what's happening in these countries. By liberal, I mean the American liberals. So American Democrats, like the Democratic Party in America, is like glomming on to this and be like, so this is what we can do. If we all work together, we can get Biden elected. And I'm like, you have fundamentally misunderstood what's happening in these countries. And I think that's so funny, dude, because they're like, I've been seeing like leftist takes of like quoting Democrats saying this type of shit. And it's like, my brother in Christ, you are the right-wing party we're trying to defeat. Like, it's just pretty
Macron is a centrist. He's a center-right. Biden, for me, is far-right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like the Democrats in America are just like misunderstanding. Like, this is not us siding with liberals. This is DSA, CPUSA, PSL coming together to support Claudia and Karina and like getting them on the board. So like, this does not mean supporting Biden. Like, I just thought that was funny.
You know, if we would come together, if we had to support somebody like Bernie, you know,
Yeah.
sure. Well, we'll do it. We'll work with Bernie. We'll work with the
Yeah.
Social Democrat.
Oh, did you see as of like today, DSA denounced and is not endorsing AOC?
Oh, thank God.
Yeah,
Fucking
just
finally.
a quick little thing. I saw a news or like a press release from DSA is like, you know, because of her complicit like voting for like equating Zionism with anti-Semitism, or anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I guess that's a bill AOC supported, and she denounced boycotting and Zionist businesses. And so for all these reasons of like basically Israel support, DSA says we can no longer endorse AOC. Sorry, that's a tangent. I just saw that like an hour ago.
No, you're good. Dude. The fucking AOC is a member of the fucking
Yeah,
CIA.
it's just
100.
it's a bummer that she's just like full on like
she's straight feds, man. There's
like
no
liberal
way.
now,
Like
just not even any hint of progressivism. Just like dyed in the wool, just like mainline Democrat party line.
if you look where she came from, like her background, like I never looked into it because earlier on, she's like, oh, she's a bartender from New York, blah blah blah, this and that. And if you actually look at her background, it's like, dude, what the fuck? This person's privileged as shit. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened to like Kristen Sinema, the senator from Arizona. You know, she started out being like Green Party, very like anarchist, like working with environmental groups and stuff, and then just slowly as she stayed in the Senate, over time she became more and more centrist. And I think that's just what happens to people when they join, you know, government in general, is that they may start off as ideologically, you know, pure, for lack of a better.
It corrupts you, man.
Yeah.
But that's why it's like, that's why we're like, we'll go tangenting off a little bit. That's why we're, you know, commies are just so like stern on like what we believe.
Yeah, we've
do
talked
not
about that
wanna-
aspect before of like,
Yeah.
like believing what we believe and not kind of wavering from that, of like having foundation. I think a lot of that stems, and this is going to go off on an even further tangent, is I think that stems from like Marxism as an ideology is based around standing firm. So like it's, you know, whereas liberalism is like kind of more populist in whichever way the wind blows, Marxism is like, you know, it's about understanding dialectics.
Yes.
And so that's
100%.
Anyway, let's bring it back to the French. Oh, sorry, you have something else to
I was going to say, it may come off as hard-headed, but all we're trying to do is make sure that what we believe, what our ideals are not morphed and changed based upon the politics of the day.
Yeah.
So like we have to have a standing ground, a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no foundation, then it's corrupted.
Yeah, and that isn't to say that like dialectical materialism doesn't evolve and adapt to your current situation, but not in the sense of like populism, of like just going whichever way the wind is blowing. But anyway, we digress. Let's get back to the French elections. Or I don't know, did you have anything more to say about kind of the French elections? Again, same with England. We'll see what happens. Oh, I alluded to with England. In France, they do have a very concrete list of demands of like over 400,000, like 95% tax on anyone making over 400,000, which is a huge tax, greatly increasing the wages for lower income people. Like they have a legitimate list. You can
lowering the retirement age back.
Oh right, lowering it back to 60. I want to say from 60.
Yeah, they want to lower it even more.
Yeah, so they have a very firm, like kind of what appears to be a non-negotiable list of like, this is what we want to do. And once again, kind of going back to my point one from earlier, is that if you have these kind of very well laid out and well-intentioned plans, people resonate with that. Voters resonate with that. So if you say, look, this is the thing I want to do to help you, voters will attach to that. And that's just a lesson that American Democrats have not learned, of like, if Biden were to come out and say, I will abolish the Supreme Court, I will raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour or $25 an hour.
But that's making promises that they don't want.
Well, right. That's the thing, is they don't want to do these things. So they're fundamentally flawed because they don't even believe in these things. Like if you were to say, because he says like, that's
why we don't want to vote for them.
And it's like, well, yeah, he doesn't want to reinstitute Roe v. Wade.
I bet you if the Democrats came out with a list of like 15 things they would like to do, and we agreed with a lot of those things, a lot of people would change their minds. A lot of people would change their minds.
That's the frustrating part, is it's so easy for Democrats to win elections because
they run on platitudes and cliches.
Yeah, what the Democrats stand for on paper, people agree with, right? Like people want access to healthcare, like free healthcare. People want abortion rights. People want tighter gun control. Even though I am in the minority there, like 70% of Americans want tighter gun control. And so if Democrats actually did anything they promised, they would never lose an election. But the problem is they never do anything. They have this image of just being liars and corrupt politicians, which they are. They have rightfully earned that reputation. So then they never win elections anymore. So in France, you see the opposite of like, this is what we're going to do. They're very clear and they're very beneficial to the working class of France. So they win elections. It's pretty fucking simple, actually, to win.
Yeah,
It's just frustrating that Democrats can't just, open their eyes and do this.
Well, it shows you that they play Machiavellian politics. That's all it is at the end of the day.
Anything else to add about French elections?
I wanted to add one last thing, and that is that with the French elections, why they won in the first place, what the plan was with the centrists was they would go from seat to seat, and they would see who is more popular in that seat, whether it be moderates or whether it be the left. And whoever would be more popular in that seat, the other person would drop out and then vote for that person. Have the whole, and that's why the left won, is because they made that deal. But even if you were in an area where the leftist was less popular than the moderate, the leftist would have to drop out and vote for the moderate. That was kind of the deal.
Oh, okay. And so they had like a pretty rigid, formalized structure in place. I see. I didn't
every
know the
single
details
seat
of that.
they would go down.
That's
yeah,
cool.
every seat they would go down. They would realize who was more popular. The other person drops out, and they support the other person. That's actually really good.
It's a pretty effective way to run. Yeah. Because that's like what you see with the Democratic Party. Once again, not to just keep making it about the Democrats, is like it's just all this weird infighting, and like they all turn on each other, and everyone, like Bernie was the clear front runner in 2020. That was going to be, or excuse me, in 2016. Remember, Bernie was like the front runner. Bernie was the one that was polling showing that he was the only one that could beat Trump, and everyone kind of like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, everybody attacked him to kind of bring down his campaign. They did it again in 2020. And so like it's kind of the opposite of taking whoever's the most popular and supporting them. In America, we do kind of the opposite. Whereas if we did do that, Bernie would have been president in 2016 and probably again in 2020.
Before we get to the video, please like, comment, subscribe, share it to that uncle who's a communist. And if he isn't, he will be.
Don't forget to follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionaryrhetoric. And Revolutionary Rhetoric is an affiliate of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network.
All right, let's get to the video. All right, now let's get to just a quick little story, quick little update. Ever since the previous president of Iran has perished, RIP or not RIP, I don't know what your beliefs are. During that helicopter crash, a new president has been elected. Now, remember, when we're talking about Iranian politics, every single politician that is being placed in front of you is handpicked and basically agreed on by the state. So the state has to, verify him, like give him the okay, the background check if he's good to run. And this guy's been around for a while. Masoud Pezeshkian. I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. At 69, he's the oldest man ever to be elected president of Iran, which is kind of ridiculous because at 69, that's like a young spring chicken.
Yeah, that's
in
20
American
years
politics.
younger than an American politician. That's crazy.
We're already people in their 80s.
That's pretty funny, actually.
So basically, during decades as a member of parliament and a cabinet minister, he's had plenty of time to hone his political survival skills. As a moderate in a system dominated by hardliners, he will need them. And this is from CBS News, by the way, what I'm reading off of. So take their political bias with a grain of salt. He was elected last Friday, beating his conservative opponent by a comfortable margin, but it was hardly a ringing endorsement. Less than half of Iran's eligible voters even bothered to come to the polls, and just over a quarter cast a ballot for him. Overall expectations are low, and Pezeshkian ambitions appear modest. So,
would you say he was 69 years old? I have here that he's 71.
I have 69. This is from CBS.
This is from BBC, so it looks like they just don't know how the fuck
He's
old
70. We'll put him in the middle.
Sure. What's the difference? He's a heart surgeon?
He's about 70.
Apparently he's a heart surgeon.
Yeah, he was a heart surgeon, and
been a member of the Iranian Parliament. Oh my God.
Professionals, which special...
Lawn cam. Give me the lawn cam. Don't look in the camera. Say something. Keep it going.
Yeah, heart surgeon. He's been a member of Iranian Parliament for a long time. He beat a hardline conservative, and this guy apparently preaches more kind of reform and unity. He's been outspoken against the morality police that murdered that young woman a couple years ago that started the kind of riots in Iran. So it seems like he's more of a, for lack of a better term, more liberal in Iran. He's also kind of outspoken against opening Iran up and not having such an isolationist policy, working with the West more.
He's also wants to get back into nuclear negotiations to open a new deal with new nuclear
Yeah, with Western
act.
powers. Yeah.
He's also trying to kind of like calm down with the Haram police.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I
He's
was
trying
going.
to,
He's been pretty
yeah.
outspoken against them. Um,
But he's also trying to calm down with fines and other types of punishment. And the mistreating of women was one of his biggest things. He's trying to wants to roll back on the crackdown enforcing mandatory wearing of headscarves. So he's probably going to get a lot of women going for him, you know?
yeah. Looks like. I mean, all in all, looks like a fairly standard guy. I don't see anything as like a huge red flag for him. I don't know anything really more about his politics, so it's kind of hard to say. Being a completely different.
Well, so at the end of the day, it's like you have to remember that. Take this with a grain of salt. This guy was vetted by the Iranian government and approved, so he will not rock the boat that much.
76 total candidates in their elections, and so 74 people dropped out. I guess. Damn. Thought that the Republican and Democrat fields here are big. I don't know how many of those were serious candidates. I guess some people are saying that they were worried with the other guy that he would kind of start like more confrontational, like more further isolation, more strict kind of
yeah, you don't
theocracy, kind of like a tighter control of religion and just kind of not head in the direction. So I think a lot of this supporting of this guy was basically to avoid that outcome.
If they were trying to go for that outcome, if that outcome came to play, I would have to say that there would be a lot of problems with the state. A lot of people would revolt, a lot of, I guess, so-called revolution. There'd be riots. It just seems like it would be smarter play in the long run to play somebody that's a bit more moderate and to calm down everybody, because right now they have a lot of internal struggles. And so if they calm down everybody, the state could probably reapply somebody that's more conservative later on. They just start this whole fucking process of like
all over again.
religious moderate. Because if you could crack down way too much, people are going to fucking, become very aware of what's going on and the injustices that are happening. Yeah. So I think if this was, planned from the Iranian government, I think this was very smart to kind of calm things down.
Yeah, well, that kind of wraps up the trilogy of elections happening across the world. France, England, and Iran, all kind of
lefties.
All left of center, at least
correct,
or left of their opponents, for lack of, because I mean, yes. The Iranian is relative to like what is left. If he's left of his opponent, that doesn't make him left. But yeah, but all of the
towards the left.
Towards the left. This trend, again, kind of to my point earlier, is like that kind of is hopeful to see that there is a growing trend of people supporting leftist candidates. And I guess the next country to hold an election is America. Well, I mean, there's 4 months before now and the election. Maybe other countries will that I just don't know about. But my point is that I'm curious to see, is this a global trend toward kind of this more progressive bend, or
I think there's going to be a global trend toward the polarities. I think people are overcentrism, and it's going to go one way or the other. Because I see Germany going toward the right.
Italy,
I see America going toward
Italy
the
just
right.
elected like a out and out fascist. What's her name? The first female prime minister. This was like last year, I think. So yeah, you're right. People are just abandoning centrism and choosing a side, and I think we're kind of seeing that ramp up. So
yes, and so yeah, we'll see. But I mean, I do have to say. Because I know our next topic, we're going to be going more toward the Middle East. With this more leftist, I guess, I wouldn't say leftism, but it's a more leftist perspective, we actually may have a little bit of a harder line on Israel.
Yeah.
With Labour Party, they're not as pro-Israel as the Tories, and same thing with
the French
the Progressive Front. They're way more notorious for being a lot more pro-Palestinian. So this is maybe this is what we needed to push Israel a little bit. The only problem here is Germany.
Yeah. Well, I saw a very funny quick article is that like Netanyahu's on this like tour. Basically, he's like touring the world trying to like drum up support, and he's skipping over a lot of countries where the ICC warrant will potentially be enforced, and so he's now kind of not on the run, but for lack of a better term, he's being very careful about what countries he touches down in. Which is just kind of funny because he is a known and wanted war criminal, yet we're still just pretending that he's not. So much so that he has to avoid certain countries because he'll be arrested for war crimes. It's just insane to me that the rest of the world is still taking him seriously, including America. But yeah, we can move on to we kind of have two topics, two aspects of kind of this the Gazan genocide and updates with Palestine. One is that there's that new Lancet study that was published. Was it Tuesday? I want to say that kind of is putting this this new death toll of the Gazan genocide at it's kind of been stagnant. We've been saying for a few weeks now that those numbers haven't changed. It's been around 40,000 for weeks.
Yeah, that was very sus.
Yeah, and so that like it was steadily rising, a couple thousand each week or whatever the numbers were, and then it just plateaued and stayed at 35,000 for months. And so a lot of us were kind of speculating that that's probably just because any infrastructure like hospitals or police or anything that would do the counting has been destroyed. And it seems that this new Lancet study that was released earlier this week kind of proves that, essentially, because their estimates of the death toll have jumped from 35 to 40,000 up to 186,000. They say that the death toll could exceed 186,000, which is kind of on track for the trajectory and the trend of where it was heading before it plateaued.
Yeah.
And so this almost kind of proves our theory in that, like, yeah, just nobody was counting anymore until this kind of outside study was done. And
just
this doesn't
think, like 186,000. Listen, that was like about how much happened during the Bosnian genocide, right? During like a 3-year stretch, except it's been in less than a year.
It's been less than 6 months. Oh no, it's been
more 6 months.
It's been 8 months. Yeah, it's only been 8 months. Yeah,
but it's been less than a year, and say there was 186. Say it was 150,000. That is the amount that's happened in Bosnia.
Yeah.
But in a quarter of the time. So let's say if Bosnia is a genocide, this has to be a genocide. If those numbers are real, even if numbers were at 35, 40,000, it's still a genocide. But now it's like, dude, you cannot argue. You cannot kill 180,000 people, right? And then not have it considered a genocide. You're a psychopath for that.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it, that whether or not this is true, because it's still, we don't really know the validity of this study, but it does take into account that this number is much higher than the official number was, because it's taking into account missing that are dead under rubble, that have been buried under rubble for months now, and it also includes all indirect deaths from food distribution, public infrastructure, health facilities, so like all of the people that have died because of the bombings.
Yeah.
Or because they lost access to food and hospital. So either starvation or disease or wounds, not the bombings themselves. So it's also including deaths related to the genocide, or tangential to the genocide, which should absolutely be counted. If you blow up all of a country's hospitals and people die of disease, you're responsible for those deaths. Just because you didn't shoot them doesn't mean that you're not responsible for their deaths. And so that's kind of what this study is taking into account, which is why this number is so much higher. Yeah.
Well, I would have to say that, like, from what I understand, the Lancet is a very reputable source.
Yeah, and
you can't. It's like, this is not the New York Times where it's fucking absolutely owned by billionaires or large multi-billionaire corporations, but it's also like a medical journal, from what I understand.
Yeah, and so it's want to make clear that this is applying like statistics and typical trends with similar conflicts to get that 186 number. So if they have the amount of direct deaths, it's never so it's not unusual. So the quote, I'll let me just quote the actual. I'm quoting from the study, which is reported on in Al Jazeera. So, quote, in recent conflicts, such indirect deaths, so kind of what I talked about earlier, range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. Continuing to quote, it is not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to kind of the amount of direct deaths that we have confirmed. If you take an estimate of 4 indirect deaths for every 1 direct death, which is again on the conservative side, that would be a conservative estimate, is 186,000. And they also do point out that estimate of 186,000 is incredibly conservative. So it's probably much higher than that. But given if you take the study at face value, it's kind of the minimum is 186,000. So
And you think if you take that 186,000 number, it's like 7 to 8% of the population.
Yeah, such a number would
Th-
represent
that's-
almost 8%, yeah, of Gaza's population. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's like 8%. You can't make arguments.
Yeah, so
for
if
this,
if that is a conservative estimate, then that's probably putting it at 10% of the population. So just imagine 10% of the Gazan population dead. So like that's an insane ratio. 1 in every 10 Palestinians or Gazans dead.
Imagine if somebody came to Seattle and killed 10% of the population in Seattle.
Just be insane. 10% of American population, just like I mean that's an insane ratio. Like it doesn't sound a lot statistically, but like as a percentage of a population, that is a lot.
People.
So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. That nobody's really talking about this too much. If you even Google this Lancet study, it's hard to kind of find Western outlets actually reporting on it. It's Al Jazeera. I think MSNBC did one piece on it, and then there's a bunch of like French, like non-American kind of outlets, and then there's multiple. The Jerusalem the Jerusalem Post, the Jewish Chronicle, all of these kind of Israeli or Israel-friendly news outlets. The Jerusalem Post called Lancet publishing blood libel. And then so they're just like they're freaking out, just like
anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it's just like they're just labeling them anti-Semites for posting their study of or for releasing their study of the.
It's old. I guess they're just calling everybody anti-Semites. Anything against Israel, anti-Semite.
Do. Yeah, you don't agree with support our genocide, you're an anti-Semite.
100%.
Anyway, moving on. Something I just wanted to bring attention to was something that was kind of just like in the news recently, is that this idea of what's called the Hannibal Directive. Are you familiar with the Hannibal Directive in Israeli military procedure?
I'm not. I read up on it a little bit, but not much.
Yeah,
to be
so
honest.
It came as a practice that came out of the late 80s in the wake of some some Israeli soldiers being kidnapped by Lebanese, fighting with Lebanese. And so now it's kind of this like scorched earth policy that the Israeli military has, wherein they will enact this so-called Hannibal Directive to prevent Israeli soldiers from being killed. They will sacrifice their own soldiers and kill their own people in an effort to reduce kidnappings or reducing their own soldiers being taken prisoners.
Yeah.
So they have a take no prisoners ethos, but only for themselves. So they'll kill themselves. They'll kill their own soldiers in order to prevent them from being taken hostage or prisoners. And this also, like I said, this came out of the wake of some hairy kind of prisoner exchange fiascos that were happening in the late 80s with Lebanon. And so from then on, they kind of have this policy of just not allowing their own people to be taken. And what we realized, or what we've has been reported on, is that in the wake of October 6th, it's been confirmed that the Hannibal Directive was kind of enacted on October 7th. So we knew that a lot of those, that everyone's up in arms about, of all of the Israelis dying on October 7th. We've known as leftists that a lot of those deaths were by Israel. Well, now it's kind of just confirmed that within the last few days, the stories broke that on October 7th, most of its own people were killed by Israel. So the Hamas didn't actually kill those Israelis on October 7th. They were killed by. They killed some. I don't take that out of context, but it was the Hannibal Directive was ordered on October 7th to prevent their own people from being captured, and so those like attack helicopters that were strafing that ground outside of that music venue was done in an effort to kill Israelis to stop them from being taken.
Got it. I wonder when that's gonna come out eventually into the history books about like what the fuck happened.
Yeah.
And then us leftists gonna be like, told you. See, it's gonna be interesting, and how long it's gonna take for that to like, and maybe be used in a court of law.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but this is also this story broke and was originally investigated by Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper. So this story this piece was done by an Israeli publication, and so it was like produced and published within Israel. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to dispute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This isn't like it's coming from some left-wing rag or something. This is coming from a legitimate publication within Israel that yes, they did this. So I mean, it's hard to kind of not believe it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue with something like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let me try. There was a
Should we-
quote I heard earlier, or I read earlier, that was like pretty wild. It was from a soldier that was there who was ordered to like fire on their own civilians. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Oh, so supposedly the Hannibal Directive had been like just abolished or canceled as a thing in 2016. But that Haaretz investigation that was published on Sunday found that, and I'm quoting from Al Jazeera again, found that Israeli commanders ordered its deployment without any caveat or further clarification during a chaotic response to the events of October 7th, when Hamas fighters attacked army outposts and surrounding villages in southern Israel. So yeah, it looks like it was not abolished, and it was very much in.
Yeah, I don't know how much I believe of those things. You know,
Yeah.
saying that it was abolished is like, he's like, you want me to trust that you abolish something like that? Any type of government that has a certain mandate or a law that will allow them to, you know, bypass international laws or their own laws to get shit done, they're not gonna, you know, walk away from that.
Yeah, so here I guess it was at 7 a.m. That morning. There was an order went out called Hannibal at Erez. Erez was the location there. It was a crossing between Israel and Gaza, and a message sent to the Gazan division about 5 hours after the attacks began ordered, quote, "Not a single vehicle can return to Gaza," end quote. And so somebody within Israel's military, quote, a source within Israel's military who spoke with, I guess, Haaretz, said, quote, "Everyone knew by then that such vehicles could be carrying kidnapped civilians or soldiers. Everyone knew what it meant to not let any vehicles return to Gaza," end quote. So kind of just proving that like the order was to destroy any vehicle before it could reach Gaza, knowing full well that they would be killing their own, their own citizens that were kidnapped and being brought to Gaza.
Oh, that shows they never cared about their citizens, man. They never cared about those that were kidnapped.
Yeah.
If they did, they would have done something a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean,
cared.
and we saw this all throughout the last few months of like these, the whole narrative the whole time from Israel has been about, getting the hostages back. We got to do everything we can to get a hostage. We're doing this to get our hostages back while simultaneously just carpet bombing Gaza. So like, and killing a lot of their own hostages in the process. Even that big attack that last massacre where I think they ended up rescuing 3 or 4 hostages. They ended up killing a lot of their own hostages, or at least I forget the numbers, but a couple of their own hostages in that attempt to get hostages. So they have proven that they don't actually care about rescuing hostages, but it is a very convenient kind of scapegoat to continue their campaign of genocide in Gaza, so long as they can claim hostages. So like
exactly, that was their excuse to go in there.
So it's just
because if you.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if you took away that excuse of being able to get the hostages, there'd be no reason to stay there.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is just further evidence that it's never about the hostages. They don't actually care about the hostages. It's just simply about the genocide.
Because at first it was their flagpole was planted that we have to eliminate Hamas, and then they moved the flagpole to like, oh, we have to get all the hostages. We'll do anything for the hostages. And so now that they're killing, that they've been found to kill their own hostages to get to their hostages, which doesn't make any fucking sense. They've gone back to the goalpost of Hamas must be eradicated. They're just moving goalposts back and forth.
Yeah.
There's no actual clear incentive as like what they actually want to do in Gaza. And so we know what the clear incentive is, and that's just basically to have ethnically cleanse all the Gazans out and have them move from the land so they can come. Israel can come claim the land and start creating fucking beachfront properties for their rich fucks over there up in Israel, or that they could sell to fucking billionaires.
Yes, just selling more property to anybody from around the world that wants to just claim a spot, a beachfront property in Gaza.
Exactly.
And
hence again, the capitalism.
And there was a UN report from last month that admitted that some of the civilians and soldiers that were killed on October 7th were from Israeli fire, but I think that report only listed them at like a dozen or so.
Yeah.
This reporting is now from Haaretz is kind of saying like, oh well, it's likely much more, but it's undetermined. So that kind of debunks that former report that it was only 12 that were killed of the 1,200 or 1,100 total dead on that day. 1,139 people were supposedly killed on October 7th, with 251 taken hostage. So of those 1,139, it's impossible to know how many were killed by friendly fire, were killed by Israel. But I would imagine it's a lot more than 12.
Yeah, I agree. All right, should we do the very last piece?
Yeah, this was something that we wanted to talk about last week, and we kind of ran out of time. Yeah, this was just a quick story broke that Russia is arming Houthi rebels with stronger artillery.
Or is thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know if they had. Actually, so we had promised to circle back on this. What did you have? What did you know about this?
There's still not much on this. Basically, there's a few articles saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin is considering arming the Houthi rebels, and they're trying to send them anti-ship ballistic cruise missiles. And I have not heard much of it ever since. But it also makes kind of sense because Yemen and the Houthi rebels are essentially allies to Iran, and Iran is allies to Russia. And I don't know much to say about this because I'm not the biggest fan of Russia, right? To me, they're a capitalist state. They have a bourgeois class. They invaded another country. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
I'm pretty indifferent about Russia.
There's this misconception that because we're anti-Ukraine, we're pro-Russia, and that could not be further from the truth. I'm also anti-Russia.
Some leftists are.
I guess there is a wing of a faction of kind of anti-Ukraine leftists that are supportive of kind of modern Russian policies, and I think that's just pretty misguided and lacks an understanding of current Russian politics. But that's a separate conversation.
Yeah,
we here at Revolutionary Rhetoric are not pro-Russia.
No, we are not pro-Russia. I'm indifferent to Russia. I'm actually a bit anti-Russia because they have their own bourgeois class and they are a capitalist state. So against the Russian civilians or the ethnicity, I'm indifferent. I don't really care. But what I will say is this is a good thing if the Houthi rebels do get some sort of more hardcore ammunition to fucking take down some fucking ships.
Yeah.
Of course,
I'm anti-Russia, but I'm
ships.
pro-Houthi shooting missiles. So if Russia
Absolutely.
gives them missiles, I guess actually I was just Googling it to see if there was any new stories breaking about this. There isn't. There's no new information about this. It's still the same thing. Russia plans to arm Houthis, but there is an article on the AP about how, as of 8 hours ago, Iran, the Houthis fired Iranian missiles at a Norwegian ship. So this kind of ties Tehran and Iran back to the Houthi rebels. So there you
exactly, because Russia could have theoretically just given those weapons and arms to the Iranian military, and then the Iranian military handed over those.
Yeah, but that wasn't Iranian made. That particular missile that hit the Norwegian ship
was Iranian made.
Iranian made missile. So
yeah,
yeah. So
bullseye, bitch.
Yeah, I don't know what that. It was just a Norwegian tanker. I don't know. I'm anti innocent lives being lost, but I'm pro sovereignty of Yemen and the Houthis. So you gotta ride that wave, like find that fine line of like support for Yemen. But I'm not down. I'm not down for
no
just,
civilians.
Like
we are against the death of
oil,
civilians.
It's like a random sailor on a Norwegian ship is killed. Like that's not what I want. But I do want the Middle East to be left alone, Yemen to be left alone without U.S. imperialist intervention or kind of the fingers of Western hegemony and Western imperialism all up in the Houthi business.
And that's not just to say that Yemen has been doing this because of Israel. They have been targeting and doing this until Israel stops. Yeah. Until Israel backs out of Gaza. So that they have a clear message, and that they're putting their mouth
money where their mouth
putting
is.
their money where their mouth is.
So,
so I respect that.
Yeah,
I respect that a lot. So I'm very pro Yemeni right now. Very pro Houthi rebel.
Yeah. So we'll have to kind of continue, follow along, see where that goes. But that's it. That was the end of our stories. Anything else you want to add as far as?
Please, if you are from what we talked about, no. But I want to reiterate. But please leave a 5-star or your own review, whatever you think we deserve on our audio podcasts. We need those reviews are literally what kind of pushes out our
Yeah.
content more on the audio side.
Yeah, you've heard that
and
likes and comments and subscriptions push YouTube videos in the algorithm. Well, it's reviews and leaving 5 stars and leaving comments on the audio podcast that kind of pushes those out. So if you could, please give us a review and a rating on your podcast app of choice. And while I mentioned it on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, a comment, a subscribe, share it with your friends. The YouTube channel is growing pretty steadily and pretty consistently, so we really appreciate this love and support on both social media and on our YouTube. Speaking of social media, Revolutionary Rhetoric on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And lastly, we have a Patreon, Revolutionary Rhetoric. We have multiple tiers. Feel free to support us on Patreon. All of that money just goes back into what you see here: lights, cameras, microphones, paint, stuff like that. Lights, camera, action. And as well as about half of all of our Patreon money is being donated to Palestinian causes to end the genocide in Gaza. I don't think there's anything else to say.
Not much. Love you guys, and hope to see you next week.
Sweet.
For episode 39?
Episode 39, yeah. And as always, Revolutionary Rhetoric is an affiliate of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network.
All right. Take it easy, guys.
Bye.
Bye.